see you guys in the dark.
I am 17, but look much younger, maybe 13 or 14 at most. Today I was at the grocery store and went and got some food from my salad bar to sit down. As I'm eating, shoveling food into my mouth at the speed of light, some dude with a food container sits down across from me without saying anything. The table was pretty small, so it was definitely weird that he just did that without asking. He was maybe 32, 35 years old at most, Asian, 5'10-ish, and wasn't unattractive or anything, but I was immediately on my guard. He had this weird vibe. I don't know how to explain it, other than that this was exactly what you'd picture when you hear stranger danger. As soon as he sits down across from me, he says, "So, is your mom around?" Now, my mom was doing the grocery shopping, and I thought it was weird he knew I was there with my mom. I mean, why not my dad or grandmother or something? I realized he must have been watching me earlier when I was with my mother. I just replied, "Yeah, she's coming," as casually as possible, and didn't look up from my phone. I could tell he was kind of confused because I didn't say anything else and continued scrolling on my phone like everything was normal. After a minute or two, he says, "This food reminds me of when I would go to ski camp," which was really random and weird. So I just said, "Yeah, it's pretty good," while going on my phone, and I continued to ignore him. At this point, I think he was a little bit confused about the conversation. For a while, he was just staring at me creepily, and I continued eating. I tried to make myself look as gross and unappealing as possible by chewing with my mouth open, slurping my water, etc., and I think he was beginning to regret coming over to me. I was getting a really weird vibe from him, so I played a sound on my phone to make it sound like it was ringing and pretended to answer and talk to my mom. While I'm on my phone, he would not stop staring at me. He eventually asks, "What grade are you in?" I ignored him. Right around then, by pure coincidence, my mom comes over, and we get ready to leave. She was talking to someone on her cell phone, so I couldn't tell her right away what was going on. But we got ready to go, and she accidentally dropped her change. Immediately, this dude lets out the most hysterical, maniacal, clown-like cackle I have ever heard, and is rocking back and forth on the chair, laughing like an absolute freaking lunatic. My mom didn't even notice because she was on the phone. As we walk out the door, I turn around, and he's still laughing loudly to himself at that table, banging on the table with his fist, and guffawing like I have never seen anyone do before. That's when I realized he was utterly insane. I gotta get out of there real quick, and hope that I never see this dude ever again. I wasn't on Reddit back in 2015, but boy is this story still fresh in my mind. I used to work as a vendor for a snack company. Basically, I would go several different grocery stores in a region and stock the shelves, do the displays, and run promotions. At one of the grocery stores, I met this guy who stocked groceries. I forgot how exactly we began talking, but he would stock the paper towels behind me, which happened to be in the same snack aisle. We worked side by side for a few months until he began talking to me, but he would always stare and walk by me extremely close. It began as small talk. He seemed nice and actually was fine to casually talk to. I'm a good listener, so he would complain to me about how lazy all his co-workers were. I told him I work independently, and I can't relate. Soon he would ask details about my work. I thought he wanted a job, and I can recruit him for a bonus. I told him what I did, and the stores I would service. This is where things took a turn for the worse. He would coincidentally show up to the stores I would service. At first he played it off like, "Oh, I didn't know you worked here at this time. My old coworker works here too." I thought it was weird, but nothing too strange yet. Then he would show up more, and more coincidentally, and buy me lunch. I told him not to do that anymore. He said he just wants to thank me for always taking the time to talk to him. I told him it's fine, don't worry about it. I'll never forget the day I saw him running down all the aisles looking for me as I was about to leave the store. I quickly ran to the back. I ran all the way through the meat department, ducking so he wouldn't see me through the double doors. When I decided to book it, I felt fast footsteps and a tap on the back of my shoulder. To my horror, it was him, asking me if I wanted to go out to eat. I said no, I have a boyfriend. People started walking over because we made quite the scene. He left me alone. The next day I went back to the store we both worked at. He handed me a note. I told him I'm not reading it, and I don't want to talk to him. I eventually read it, and it was a handwritten note apologizing for coming off too strongly as a friend. And now I'm the only person who asks about his day when people would ignore him. I felt kind of bad. For the next few months we would work together, but I'd ignore him. He backed off for a bit, but this dude did some research or something. He found out the school I went to, what I majored in, and he signed himself to get back to school. This dude was like 33 at the time, with 3 degrees in business, computer science, and a CNA certificate. He definitely didn't need another one. He asked how I liked the biology program at my college that I was going to. I was like, it's good. I do recommend it. This was the first time we spoken in months, and I thought he genuinely wanted information on the particular program I was in. He began taking classes at my school. When you register for a course in the beginning of the semester, there's an app that tells how many students in your class and who your classmates will be. At work, he would be like, "Are you going to microbiology?" Luckily, this class was offered at 2 different time slots on different campuses, and I always went to the one in the evening due to my schedule. He had a lot of classes to catch up on since I already had a year in, and he told me he wanted to graduate with me. We never crossed paths on campus, but he started befriending my classmates in the program and would ask about me. Well, I chose not to walk the day we graduated. I quit that job and got a job in my field, and he's still at the same grocery store. To this day, he will message me every holiday and on my birthday on Facebook. I found out later on I wasn't the only girl he did this to. He did this thing to another girl too. He's married now, but I absolutely never want to meet him again. To start, I'm a 16-year-old girl, about 5'8" or 5'9". Anyways, I have dyed hair. It's pink, purple, and blue. This is important to the story. So the other day, I was in the grocery store standing in line, and the cashier handed me a close sign to put on the conveyor, because she was going to be gone for the day, and I was the last person she'd ring up. So I'm waiting, chilling there, when all of a sudden some older guy that's even bigger than me comes up and stands behind me, even though the line said closed. He leaned in really uncomfortably close and whispered in my ear, "Your rainbow hair is pretty, young lady." Like I would feel this man's breath blowing my hair. He was that close to me. I'm one of those people that gets extremely uncomfy when people get really close to me. So I was basically shaking in my boots. Well, I stuttered out an awkward thanks and moved in line. The cashier noticed my uncomfiness and said, "Sir, I'm closing after I ring her up." It just freaked me out that he had no sense of boundaries, especially with a very young girl. The compliment itself wasn't creepy. It was just creepy how he literally did real-life ASMR on me and got super close to me. Guy at the grocery store, let's not meet until you learn how to tap people on the shoulder like a normal person. This happened when I was still in high school, so I was about 16. My friends at the time, Jack and Dan, and I would often skip the last class or two in favor of hanging out at one of their places, or cruising around in the old school muscle car that Jack had fixed up with his dad. One day, we swung by a grocery store that had a place in the back that made pretty good Chinese food, and that sounded like it would hit the spot right now. We parked, browsed the aisles a little, and picked up some sodas as our orders were being prepared. The three of us paid, and on the way out, I told them I had to take a leak, giving my bags to Jack to look after. The bathrooms are usually at least fair on the cleanliness side, but I guess that day someone was asleep at the wheel, or no one had bothered to notify the staff of the mess inside. I was, and still somewhat am, shy while peeing, so I like to use the stalls when able. The handicap stall's toilet was filled to the brim with murky brown water and toilet paper, more wet paper clinging to almost every surface within 2 feet of the toilet. Yeah, no. The stall next to it was even worse. Someone had finger painted in there. Seriously, who does that? The final stall I checked had urine all over the seat, and some on the floor, as well as some brown smudges and damp toilet paper on the seat. But I figured I didn't have to touch any of that. I just used some clean paper to lift the seat, wiped my hands thoroughly, and did my business before flushing and leaving the seat up, not wanting to give anyone that might come in the idea that I had left the seat down and pissed all over it. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Enter the homeless man. He had long, dark, matted hair and matching beard. His face was almost completely hidden. He wore the typical hobo garb, dirt-covered coat, slightly torn jeans, worn sneakers that might have been white at some point, and frayed fingerless gloves. I gave him a small smile and polite nod as he shuffled past, giving me no more than a quick glance. I was washing my hands by the time he reached the stall he had seen me come out of. I heard him huff and grumble a little bit before he backed out of the stall and growled "Nice" at me. I tensed and looked over to him. He was nodding in a thanks a lot kind of way, gesturing into the stall as his eyes glared at me between his thick, coarse beard and his bushy eyebrows. Being the extremely awkward and non-confrontational teen that I was, all I could muster was a somewhat spastic, "That wasn't me." Totally convincing, right? "This wasn't you?" he grumbled. His voice suggested he was somewhere between confused and furious as he pointed to the toilet seat. I shook my head, staring wide-eyed at him before quickly rinsing my hands and stepping over to the paper towels. I could see him out of the corner of my eye, still looking at either me or the stall, and grumbling under his breath. I was almost done drying my hands when I heard him stomping up behind me. I whipped around and saw him reaching out his left hand. I initially thought he was reaching to grab some paper towels, but his hand clapped down on my shoulder, his right hand swinging up until his fist was pressing painfully into my chest. He had one of those foldable knives with the serrated edge hovering over my neck. "You little bastard," he spat through his teeth, his face red with anger. "You think you can treat me like shit? Just because I live in my car? Just because I'm dirty, huh?" He roared, getting louder with each sentence. Honestly, I think I could have pissed myself back then that I had not taken care of that already. All I could do was stare at him with the classic deer-in-the-headlight look, standing on my tippy toes and trying to press my back into the tile wall behind me to avoid contact with his knife. I wanted to explain that the seat was already dirty when I came in, and that I wouldn't want to clean up some inconsiderate asshole's mess either. Again, words escaped me, and all that came out was me squeaking, "Please, please don't hurt me." I started to blubber, unable to stop the tears from welling up and running down my face. I guess this shameful display moved him to take pity on me, taking his hand off of my shoulder, but he pressed his fist harder into my chest, causing me to let out a choked cry as I closed my eyes and leaned my head back, waiting to feel the blade slide across my throat. I felt him lean in, his foul breath on my face as he whispered, "Next time, I'll make you lick it up." The pressure was removed from my chest so suddenly I almost fell on my face, but I caught myself, spun around, and ran without looking back. My friends were talking and leaning against the car when I came tearing out of the store. They chuckled at first, asking if I had fallen in, but quickly realized that I was in distress. I told him everything that had happened. Jack, almost being the protective big brother to me, stormed inside and notified the store's employees. The police were called and ended up catching the homeless man as he sat in his car, parked in the grocery store parking lot. They had cuffed him in the back of their cruiser as they questioned me a few times. I kept glancing over nervously. He never took his eyes off of me, staring daggers at me until they took him to the station. He apparently had a few priors of aggressive behavior, but had never pulled a weapon before today. I did feel kind of sorry for him. I have a soft spot for the less fortunate. And despite him coming within inches of cutting my throat, I felt bad that he had become such an angry person due to his situation. It was now getting him into deeper and deeper trouble. I don't know what happened to him after that. My friends and I avoided that store and the area around it for the rest of the time that I lived in that state. Jack offered to let me drive on the way to his place, saying as how I asked him almost every day to get behind the wheel. But I told him that I didn't think it was a good idea right now. My hands were still shaking a little, right? We sat in silence during the drive, and while we ate, turning on the TV for some background noise. Things did pick up as time passed, and it was decent after all that. I felt a little better as weeks went by, but ever since, I have had the habit of wiping down the seats of any public toilets I use, even if it's not my mess. I can just wash my hands afterwards. To the homeless man that accused me of looking down on him, pinned me to the wall of a grocery store bathroom, and held a knife to my throat, I hope I didn't make life too much harder for you, and that you are doing well. But just in case you still hold a grudge and possess that knife, I think it's best for both of us that we don't meet ever again. This is when I was about 13, and in 7th grade. I was going into the grocery store with my mom and grandma, as we did almost every weekend after school. My mom had gotten a broken ankle at the time, which meant she couldn't walk very well. Even though she didn't have to wear a boot or anything anymore, there was still a lot of pain. So it made sense for me to do a lot for her since she couldn't. As we were walking, she realized she forgot something from a different aisle and told me to go grab something from over there for her. Easy. I did that pretty much every time. I started walking to this aisle pretty quickly, since we had stuff to do after this, and I didn't want to keep my mom waiting. I had noticed this guy walking in, but it didn't really bother me, since he just looked like some weird old guy by himself. As I was speed walking by, he mumbled something, just loud enough for me to hear, like, "Damn girl, you go," or something along those lines. It was creepy, but I had 2 older sisters, and a mom who was very smart, and taught me about bad people at a young age. I decided to just pretend I didn't hear him, and I wasn't even sure I heard him correctly, so I just ignored it. I went back to my mom, and it turned out she had something else she wanted me to grab. My sister was working at the ice cream shop in a different state at the time, and they were selling their ice cream at the store, so she wanted me to grab some for us, just to try it. It's important to say that the freezer was on the wall, and I couldn't really see anything behind me as I was looking into it. As I was reaching up, looking over the flavors, I felt really weird and gross, so I stopped and turned around to see him standing right behind me, clearly looking at my legs and butt. Since I was reaching up, he stopped and went, "Oh, did you find what you were looking for?" Knowing that I probably shouldn't be by this creepy guy any longer, I said, "Yep," quickly, and pushed by him. He was trying to corner me in, as this place didn't have many people, and was near the exit. I walked past to my mom, explained what happened, and watched as he followed me around the rest of the store. I never saw him again, luckily. So, weird guy in the grocery store, please, let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.